Well, good morning. Welcome this morning. Welcome to Trinity Church and our adult forum here on Sunday morning, January 17th, I believe it is. And we welcome back to our time today, Dr. Jospeh Fox. Dr. Fox was with us last week and gave just a compelling presentation about the Remembrance Project, a project of what's called the Equal Justice Initiative, and the Buncombe County, Asheville part of that project that Dr. Fox is a member of. Uh, Let me remind our participants today that you are actually able to go back to Trinity's YouTube page and you can view last week's adult forum and that presentation and the information on there. We also have shared it, I believe, shared the actual PowerPoint presentation as well. So you'd be able to see that as well. And I just want to point out the presentation that Dr. Fox gave last week also includes lots of citations about the history that he shared with us for those who wish to dive deeper into the history, which is deeply fascinating in so many ways and compelling. So Dr. Fox, once again, I know you introduced yourself last week, but for those who weren't here last week, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about you?
Once again, I'm delighted to be joining you today. Uh, I grew up in this area, actually grew up in Tryon, North Carolina. And so those of you that know of the late Nina Simone, I actually grew up living across the street from
Oh,
where her parents moved after she was born. And so have a rich history in this area. I am the vice president of the board of the MLK Association of Asheville and Buncombe County, where I also chair the Peace March and Rally, as well as the Buncombe Community Remembrance Project. I have been back in this area for a number of years now, retired 7 years ago from the North Carolina Community College. My last 7 years of um, in the system, I was the department chair of business for Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College. So again, just delighted to be joining you today.
well, we're so glad to have you back. You shared such a wonderful, deep history yesterday, and details really about the Remembrance Project and what it is. Before we go there, my questions there, can you told us how the Remembrance Project is really a project of the Equal Justice Initiative. I know that some of us know about the Equal Justice Initiative, some of us do not. Can you give us a synopsis of the Equal Justice Initiative?
Yes, be happy to. So the Equal Justice Initiative was founded in 1989 by Brian Stevenson. And some of you may be aware of Brian Stevenson and his work. He is the individual that released the movie Just Mercy. He is a civil rights attorney in the Deep South who years ago started working to um, on the behalf of folks on death row, and mainly African American males on death row that had been wrongfully accused of crimes and or committed crimes as a youth, as well as individuals that are on death row that were mentally uh, incapable of understanding what they did. I think one of his youngest defendants was 13 years old. And
Hmm.
so he really became famous around one of the individuals that he highlights in the book of the same name, Just Mercy, where an individual was accused of, I think it was whistling at or at a white woman or killing someone in the town. It's been a number of years since I actually read the book. Um, and he had numerous folks, black and white, that testified that at the time of the crime, he was at a church fish fry cooking. And even though he had black and white folks that testified on his behalf, he was found guilty and was sentenced. And it was a murder. It was sentenced to uh, uh, death row. And so Brian Stevenson really worked on his case and eventually got him released. And so in the book, it details the whole trial. Doing his early work of getting folks off of death row, he stumbled across a lot of research around lynchings in the South, and particularly the Deep South. And so, based on that, he founded the Equal Justice Initiative to recognize folks that had been lynched and killed throughout the United States, but particularly in the South, and to encourage individual counties throughout the United States that had a lynching of record. And we always have to say a lynching of record because we know that there were other folks killed, but a record means that there were actual documentation, court records, archives, articles, etc., of record that were killed throughout the United States. So the Equal Justice Initiative created several projects. One is the historical marker, where any county that have individuals of records that were lynched in that county can petition the Equal Justice Initiative to bring that historical marker to their county in recognition of those folks. There is also a soil collection project where if you can determine the site location of where the lynchings occurred, um, you collect soil from that location. There's a ceremony that occurs with that, and then the county keeps a portion of that soil, and then a portion of that soil goes to the Equal Justice Initiative Museum, where it's stored in the museum. So the museum actually houses the soil collection as well as it is a museum with statues hanging down representing the lynchings that occurred throughout the United States. Third project is the essay project to involve youth in looking at the history of racial violence in the United States.
Wow. And that's is that in Montgomery, the
Yes,
museum?
that is Montgomery, Alabama.
So when you are part of leading the Remembrance Project for Buncombe County and the city of Asheville. And so as you spoke about last week, you're working on more research on the 3 lynchings that took place in Buncombe County. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And once that process is done, the idea and the goal would be to have the historical markers somewhere here in Buncombe County.
Yes, and so at this point, we just to kind of give you our timeline, we've been working on this project now for almost 2 years, and so we're really getting towards the end of the project. Uh, After we really had to stop meeting face to face because of COVID-19 pandemic, we started a monthly newsletter so that community can be informed of what we're doing. And that's located. Anyone that is not on that email distribution site can go to the MLK website of Asheville and sign up for the newsletter. But we've started that, and one of the newsletters we actually asked folks, community to give us input around site locations that they would like to see the historical marker brought to. Probably the number one response was somewhere around where the Vance Monument is currently located. We had another group of folks that thought it should be in the historical block, Eagle Market block area. We had a few people that wanted it to be near the MLK Park, the Martin Luther King Jr. Park here in downtown Asheville. And then we had a number of folks that recommended individual street corners where the historical marker would be. We currently are looking at site locations. We hoped to narrow that down either January or February so that we can approach City Council with our petition for the marker to be located somewhere in the downtown area, probably near the courthouse, as we mentioned last week. Um, we hope then to actually do the paperwork with the Equal Justice Initiative and the wordings that will be on the marker by March, and really hope to have the marker here and installed in June as part of our annual Juneteenth celebration.
Outstanding. Um, so I want to ask you a little bit about the kind of the underneath, if you will. And that is one of the slides that you showed us talked about, it's kind of the question of why. Why do this? Why do we want to do this? And the phrase that comes to mind for me is that word believe you used is healing. How do we achieve healing in the conversation and in the reality of racial relationships in our own nation? And could you just say a few words about that why question?
So the why portion probably goes back to the divisions that we're seeing, not only recently, politically and economically, but from our original history. And so when you are trying to move to a healing model, the model that we have embraced starts with recognition and acknowledgement. And so getting folks in the same room discussing their shared experiences, and particularly folks of different culture, different races, different ethnicity. Because what my experience is as a male of a Dr. Hugh is going to be different from even another male of a Dr. Hugh. And so getting folks to really embrace that and to understand the racial violence that has occurred, particularly against folks of Dr. Hugh. And so some of our training actually starts out with Native Americans and the impact of really enslavement on the Native Americans, how they were treated, what that set up in terms of the systems and system biases. And so we talk a lot about system biases and microaggressions. And microaggressions are the slight derogatory treatment that folks, particularly folks of a Dr. Hugh, experience on a daily basis. They're called microaggressions in that an individual's slight or left-hand compliment doesn't hurt or kill you, but 1,000 of those tiny cuts will cause you to bleed out and die. And so even just from a mental health and health perspective, women, individual of low wealth communities, immigrants, individuals of a Dr. Hugh tend to have a higher stress level, higher blood pressure, dealing with microaggressions, racial discrimination, in some terms that folks are not even aware that they're doing it. So the why piece of it is to acknowledge that this is occurring, to move folks, particularly white folks, from a comfortable level of privilege to understand and to have some empathy to walk in other folks' shoes, to then be able to move to healing. But you can't move to healing until we acknowledge and recognize that other folks' experiences are different than our experiences. I usually during workshops that I do for my private clients. I own a consulting firm, and so I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and equity audits, et cetera. And so I share my personal experience as a male of a Dr. Hugh of coming home. I was living in the Charlotte area at the time, but I was a college instructor in Statesville at Mitchell Community College. And I came home one Friday, and where I lived, there was a grocery store on the corner. And so if it was a Friday after 5, it was more convenient to park in my assigned parking space where I live, walk across the street, get what I was going to purchase for the evening or for the weekend, and walk back to my place. Well, I had come from work. It was during the winter. I had a suit and tie on. I had an overcoat on, and folks that know me know that I'm a hat person. So I had a little tam on, and I'm walking from the Harris Teeter with 2 grocery bags in my hand. Police car flies up the road by me, or I can see him approaching with his lights on. So, the light changes. I cross the street. I'm now on the block where I live. And the police car slows up as it gets near me. I'm walking, haven't jaywalked, so I think nothing about it. I continue to walk. And the police pull his car up, patrol car, up on the sidewalks, blocks me, jumps out, and demands to see license, ID. And I'm a facilitator, so I go immediately into my facilitation skills. Oh, good evening, officer. What seemed to be the problem here? And he says, we've had incidents of people breaking in this area. And I said, well, that's good to know because I live here. And I said, so I'm happy to know that you're really on your job. And I said, but I don't think I'm dressed appropriately to be crawling through anybody's window. So again, using humor. And that was the first time he saw beyond a dark-skinned male walking to the street to an actual person. So getting folks to recognize that has been part of our history, and understanding folks' experiences and their emotions and their feelings is the first step towards healing. But if we don't acknowledge these shared experiences that are different from ours, then we will never have honest conversations around what our true history has been in the United States.
I so appreciate the language you use about healing, because often I feel that it's kind of an unspoken, is like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Right?
Right.
And so it's often unspoken. We go into either conversations about race, or even training sometimes on it, and there's the goal is never spoken.
Right.
And so by naming the goal as healing, it really sets the stage of why. Why are we having these conversations? Why are they important? And then to go beyond that, as you suggest and say, and as you're actually working on, in fact, is that in order to heal, we need to know what we're trying to heal, which is, it seems to me, if you think I'm correct, the entire purpose of the Remembrance Project. In order to heal, we need to know what it is that needs to be healed.
That would be 100% correct. That, when we're looking at other folks' frustrations and stress levels and emotions, and trying to understand where that comes from, um, we can't understand it until we hear some of the stories. And so part of what we do is we set aside space for storytelling. And that's between blacks and whites, so that folks can start sharing their stories and really listening and hearing what folks are saying, to move to that next level.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and as we think about that word, I mean, if I might interject, this being a church function, healing is our calling. I mean, we are, as people of faith, as disciples of Jesus, to be real specific, we're called to the project of healing. And so, and we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to do it in our own lives often. We don't know how to do it in the relationships often that are most important to us in our in our lives. And so no wonder one might say that it can be difficult for us of a lighter hue, as you say, to actually know where to begin, to
Right.
actually know where to start, know what words to use, know what that that there is even a process for it. And so when I hear of the Remembrance Project, I think that this is a beginning, if you will, and a start, if you will, to the whole um, idea of healing, racial healing,
Yeah,
racial
and
healing.
I think church is the one of the best resources for that. I'm involved with when I live in, I split my time between Blackmouth and North Carolina, and I still have property down in Tryon, so I'm back and forth. So I have two churches that I really
Sure.
am a member of.
We
I
have
have
some of those too here at Trinity.
Right. So when I'm here in Black Mountain, I go to the First Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. When I'm in Tryon, I go to St. Luke Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. But one of the things in terms of healing and the work of churches, because of the type of work I do, um, it's very easy for the churches in Tryon to get together. So we're actually doing a series of sacred conversations on race relations between St. Luke Christian Methodist Church, which is primarily African American church, the First Congregational Church in Tryon, which is predominantly a white church, and the Tryon United Methodist Church. So we actually have just finished right before Lent. Actually, we did a 3 or 4 part series with the three churches. And then each June, those three churches come together as part of our racial healing, and we do a joint vacation Bible school together.
Oh, wow.
We do a joint. Some years it doesn't happen, but we usually attempt to do a joint Easter celebration together. And part of that has grown out of an organization that was founded in Tryon. It's called the Thermobelt Friendship Council. In the late 80s, there was a planned Klans march in downtown Tryon. And a group of Black and white citizens got together and said, okay, how do we show that we do not support that and we do not want that as a group of Black and white citizens in our town? So they formed this organization. They met with SBI, FBI, local law enforcement. And basically what happened was they encouraged all the businesses in downtown Tryon to close their doors, shut their blinds during the march, and encourage citizens that were downtown during the march to turn their back on the marchers. And so that occurred. But from that initial group said, how do we heal as a community? And so how do we become friends? Hence the name, the Friendship Council. And so they
Wow.
have been meeting monthly now since the late 1800s, since the late 1980s, monthly as a group of Black and whites in local restaurants so folks have visibility. Every June, the first Saturday in June, they do a community picnic. So I think this is where, and so from that is where some of the outreach to the Black and white churches in the Tryon area began to form around racial healing, sacred conversations dealing with race issues. And so I think this is, so we always try to leave people with strategies. So
Yeah.
those are some strategies I want to leave with you. I know that you all have been very involved with the MLK Association of Asheville and Buncombe County, and we really appreciate that. And part of that is then helping people to have a comfortable space, a safe space to discuss some of these issues.
Well, I'm really thankful for that. And I suspect in the future we're going to look for more partnership for these conversations. I would just want to also, I'm really personally I'm really focused on this aspect of healing, because I can be asked, what's I'm sure you've heard, what's the use of bringing up old wounds, so to say. And so I'm really just to repeat myself, grateful for the language of healing and how important it is, and how it is exactly what we are called to be as disciples of Jesus. I was also thankful in the presentation you gave last week. I think this is important for those of us those who are native Southerners, those of us who have adopted the South, to know that, in your presentation last week, you brought up where slave trading really began in New England. And, as someone who grew up in New England, and somewhat of a genealogist, I have in my own ancestry, a gentleman, William Pinnegar, was captain of one of the major slave ships that came in and out of Newport, Rhode Island. So, this isn't just for Southern conversation, right?
Right.
Even given the Civil War, it's not just a Southern conversation. It's a human conversation as well. I understand deeply the history and challenge of it being a Southern conversation. Yet it touches all of us, is my real main goal to say there. So that is very helpful. I loved how you talked about the Equal Justice Initiative. Part of the project is both the soil collection program and bringing. Do we know where in Buncombe County these 3 incidents happened?
Oh, I don't have my notes in front of me, but
Okay.
one.
I don't know how significant it really is, but
right. One was in the area of Buncombe County, where you're almost actually into Madison County, headed towards Hot Springs. And we've actually been able to find it's out near the Vance birth place, the actual center out there, right down the street from it, actually. And it is currently, and I don't remember which church, but the property has changed hands a couple of times, and there actually is a church owns the property now. We actually went out and was out walking the land. One, well, that's the one I'm more familiar with, so I won't speculate on the other 2.
Yeah, I'm not sure how important that is anyway. I was just curious. Well, we're kind of at our time, but I just am so thankful that you joined us today. And then let me just let everyone know also, we have the great privilege, really, granted by the MLK Association, to be host tomorrow night, actually, here at Trinity Church of the MLK Association Candlelight Award Ceremony. And so we will be welcoming the Reverend Dr. Byron Wade, who is the new General Presbyter of the Presbyterian Church in Western North Carolina, as our keynote speaker. And I'm so pleased because I know him personally from some other work together we have done in the wider church. So please join us tomorrow night. It will be on Trinity's YouTube page, and it begins at 6 o'clock, I believe. So anyway, again, thank you so much for being with us. And we look forward to being a part and hearing so much more and being a part of so much more. So thank you again. God bless.
God bless you.